The war we fought before we knew they were alive. The sky was empty. For decades, humanity had scanned the stars, hoping for a sign, a whisper, anything to indicate we were not alone. But the universe remained quiet. That silence, once comforting, had grown heavy. People spoke of loneliness, of isolation, of a cosmic emptiness that mirrored the void in their own hearts. Colonel Elara Myles sat in the observation tower of the International Space Command. Her eyes, green as the forests of old Earth, traced the trajectory of yet another comet passing the edge of the solar system. "We've been watching for years," she said to Commander Voss, her voice flat. "Nothing. Just endless nothing." Voss, a tall man with silver-streaked hair and eyes like steel, nodded. "Until now," he said, tapping the screen in front of him. The sensors had picked up something unusual, a faint signal from a star system far beyond Pluto. Elara leaned closer. The signal was weak, almost like a heartbeat struggling through the static. "It's alive," she whispered. "No," Voss replied, his tone heavy. "We don't know that. We only know it exists." But that night, when the signal pulsed again, Elara could not shake the feeling that the universe was no longer empty. Something had awakened, and humanity had unknowingly provoked it. Weeks later, reports came in. Strange incidents at colonies on Mars, communications blackouts, satellites disappearing in orbit. At first, scientists blamed solar flares, equipment failures, or human error. But the patterns were too precise, too coordinated to be random. The first attack was subtle. A mining station on Mars reported sudden equipment failures, life support systems shutting down in rapid sequence. By the time help arrived, only shadows remained of the crew. No bodies, no debris, just silence. Elara and Voss convened the emergency council. "We are under attack," Elara said, trying to keep her voice steady. "But by whom? We have no enemies in space." A young officer, Lieutenant Soren Kale, spoke up. "Colonel, what if it's something we didn't see? Something alive?" The room went quiet. No one had considered it seriously. The idea of life beyond Earth had been a dream, a curiosity, not a threat. And now it was a nightmare. Voss clenched his fists. "We fight back," he said. "Even if we don't know who or what we're fighting." Humanity mobilized. Fleets were deployed across the solar system, weapons ready, satellites armed, cities prepared for potential strikes. But the enemy remained invisible. They moved through the void like shadows, striking, retreating, never leaving a trace. Elara commanded a reconnaissance mission to Jupiter's orbit. Her crew of 8 scientists and soldiers watched the swirling storms below, scanning for any sign of the attackers. And then they saw it. A structure, massive and unlike anything human, drifting silently through the storm clouds. It pulsed with a faint blue light, almost as if it was breathing. Soren whispered, "It's alive." Elara's hand tightened around the railing. "And it's watching us." Before they could react, the structure emitted a wave of energy, invisible but devastating. It disabled their systems, knocked out communication, and left the crew floating in silence. When they returned to base, shaken and confused, the council had already made a decision. This was no longer a reconnaissance mission. This was war. Months passed. Battles were fought across the solar system, but humanity's enemies were never seen clearly. Ships vanished without a trace, colonies fell mysteriously, and every victory felt hollow. Elara began to question everything. "We've been fighting blindly," she told Soren one night. "We don't even know who they are or why they're attacking. We might be the invaders in their eyes." Soren frowned. "But we can't stop. If we don't fight, everyone dies." Elara sighed. "That's the tragedy. We've been at war with something we didn't understand, something we never even knew existed." Meanwhile, scientists on Earth scrambled to decode the signals. They discovered patterns, complex and deliberate. Not random, not natural. And slowly, the horrifying truth began to emerge. Humanity had been broadcasting messages across the cosmos for centuries, messages we thought were innocent. The stars were listening, and they had responded. The scientists working on Earth had been decoding the strange pulses for weeks. Elara visited the main research station to see for herself. Rows of computers flashed with data, researchers scribbling notes furiously. The room smelled of coffee and exhaustion. Dr. Elara Voss, a linguist specializing in exoplanetary signals, looked up when Elara entered. Her eyes were bloodshot, but her voice carried urgency. "Colonel, you need to see this. We think we can understand them." Elara approached the screen. Patterns of light and dark-formed shapes, repeating in sequences that almost resembled language. Dr. Voss tapped a series of keys. "It's not random. They are communicating with us. But it's angry, defensive. They're asking why we've been sending messages, why we've been watching, interfering." Elara felt a chill. Humanity had always believed we were alone, broadcasting our knowledge as a way to reach out. Instead, it seemed we had unknowingly threatened a species far older and far more aware than we could imagine. "We never knew they were alive," Elara whispered. "We were the aggressors before the first shot was fired." The council convened an emergency session. Satellites and ships had been reorganized for defense, but now there was hope for communication, a chance to stop the war before total annihilation. Voss looked grim. "We can't afford mistakes. If we signal them, we don't know how they'll respond." Elara raised her hand. "We have to try. If they understand us, maybe the attacks will stop. If not, well, we've already lost too much to remain silent." A team of linguists, scientists, and soldiers worked together to craft a message. They simplified human greetings, combined math and music, and added images of Earth's natural beauty. Carefully, they transmitted it to the location of the largest pulse, the blue-lit structure near Jupiter. Days passed in tense silence. Then, the signal returned. Not in words, but in motion. Thousands of tiny objects, glowing faintly, converged toward the message. They formed shapes, almost like letters, and then, impossibly, they shifted into something that resembled eyes, hundreds of them, blinking and moving. Elara stared at the display, stunned. "They're alive. They're seeing us." With each passing day, more signals were exchanged. Humanity learned that these beings were not invaders in the sense humans understood. They were guardians of life in the galaxy, creatures who had observed Earth for centuries. The messages humans had sent, our broadcasts, rockets, and probes, had been misinterpreted as threats. Soren listened carefully during a translation session. "So, they attacked us because they thought we were dangerous?" Dr. Voss nodded. "Yes. They are incredibly sensitive to interference. Even unintentionally, we crossed a line." Elara felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. Entire fleets, countless lives, and decades of fear had been the result of ignorance. "We fought a war with ghosts," she murmured. "We were the enemy before we even knew they were alive." The beings, whom the humans eventually named the Watchers, communicated a single request: cease all harmful broadcasts, withdraw military presence from vulnerable zones, and approach with understanding, not aggression. The realization came slowly, painfully. Entire colonies were destroyed, fleets lost, and millions of lives spent in fear and confusion. Humanity had learned a bitter lesson. Knowledge without understanding can be dangerous, and assumptions can ignite wars that never needed to happen. Elara visited Mars, walking through the remnants of the mining colony that had vanished first. The silence was deafening. Ghostly shadows of abandoned buildings stretched under the sunless sky. Soren joined her. "All this for nothing." Elara shook her head. "Not nothing. We survived. And now we have a chance to make things right. But we must remember what we learned. We must never assume the universe is ours to command." The Watchers sent a final wave of energy, not harmful this time, but gentle and luminous. A signal of peace. Humanity responded cautiously, offering an olive branch through science and dialogue. The war had ended, but its lessons would echo through generations. The solar system was quiet, but the quiet was uneasy. Humanity had survived the attacks, yet the scars were visible everywhere. Empty colonies, destroyed fleets, and trembling hearts reminded everyone of the war they had fought blindly. Elara stood on the observation deck of the International Space Command, staring at Jupiter's swirling storms. She thought of the Watchers, the beings whose very existence had been a mystery until it was almost too late. Soren approached her, holding a small tablet displaying messages from the Watchers. "They want to see us act, not just speak," he said. "No more weapons pointed at them. No more interference." Elara nodded. "Actions, not words. That's what trust is made of." Efforts began immediately. Colonies were evacuated where needed, fleets were reorganized into observation missions, and scientists were sent to study and understand the Watchers' intentions rather than fight blindly. Humanity's arrogance had cost them dearly, and now humility was the only currency that mattered. Through weeks of patient communication, the Watchers revealed the scope of their existence. They were ancient, older than the sun itself, and their duty was to protect life in the galaxy. They had seen countless species rise and destroy themselves, leaving nothing behind. Humanity had appeared as a curious spark, but their constant probing, transmissions, and experiments had set off alarms. Dr. Voss translated their latest message. "We do not hate you, but you are fragile. You do not yet understand what it means to exist in the vastness. Your war was unnecessary, yet you survived. Perhaps that is a sign." Elara felt the weight of their words. Humanity had assumed the role of the universe's master without even knowing they were guests. "We have so much to learn," she whispered. Soren, leaning beside her, replied, "And so much to atone for." The war had taught humanity 3 things. Assumptions can destroy. They had assumed no life existed. That assumption had nearly led to their extinction. Actions without understanding are dangerous. Every broadcast, every probe, every fleet sent into space had been interpreted as aggression. Survival depends on humility. The Watchers were patient and wise. Had they been otherwise, humanity might not have survived to this point. Elara gathered a team of young officers and scientists. "We need to educate the next generation," she said. "They must understand the consequences of ignorance. They must remember the war we fought before we knew they were alive." Soren nodded. History isn't just about victories. Sometimes it's about survival and the lessons that come with it. Elara found herself walking alone on the cratered surface of the moon. The Earth hung in the sky, a fragile blue marble, and she felt the enormity of what had happened. Voss joined her silently. "It could have ended differently," he said. "We could have lost everything." Elara nodded. "We did lose in many ways, but we survived. That counts." Soren approached as well, holding a small box with relics from fallen fleets. "We must honor them," he said softly. "They fought without knowing the truth. They gave everything to survive a war that never should have happened." The 3 stood in silence, the moon's gray plains reflecting a galaxy that had witnessed their mistakes. Humanity had survived its own ignorance, but the cost was written in every empty colony and every lost life. Months passed. Humanity and the Watchers began to collaborate. Research stations were built to study the mysteries of the universe, not to conquer them. Ships traveled through the solar system, not as warriors, but as explorers. Elara addressed the Council one final time. "We fought a war before we knew they were alive. That war cost us dearly. But now we have a chance to rebuild, to learn, to live in understanding rather than fear." Soren added, "And we must never forget. Our mistakes are written in the stars. If we ignore them, history will repeat itself." The council members nodded, the weight of the past balanced by the fragile hope of the future. Above them, in the silent void of space, the Watchers pulsed gently, as if breathing in unison with humanity. The war had ended, but the universe remained a reminder of humility, curiosity, and the consequences of assumptions. Humanity's fleets were no longer weapons of war. They were vessels of knowledge and peace. Elara, now promoted to commander of the Interstellar Observation Division, prepared the first true exploratory mission beyond the solar system. The crew was small but skilled. Soren Kale, now Chief Science Officer, Dr. Elara Myles, lead linguist, and several engineers and pilots who had survived the war. They were to travel to the star system, where the Watchers had first been detected. As the ship prepared for launch, Elara stood on the observation deck, looking at Earth's fragile blue glow. "We're stepping into the unknown," she said quietly. "But this time, we go with understanding, not arrogance." Soren placed a hand on her shoulder. "And if we fail?" Elara smiled faintly. "Then we fail as explorers, not destroyers." The engines ignited, and humanity's first true mission to understand life beyond its solar system began. After months of travel through silent space, the crew arrived at the Watchers region. Vast, ethereal structures floated like cosmic coral, glowing with soft light that pulsed rhythmically. The Watchers' presence was overwhelming but serene. They communicated visually, sending waves of color and pattern that the ship's systems translated into feelings: curiosity, caution, and finally, acceptance. Elara stepped forward on the communication bridge. "We come in peace," she said, not expecting a verbal response. The ship's screen shimmered, and shapes formed, complex, beautiful, and impossible to describe with human words. Dr. Voss interpreted slowly. "They understand us. They know we have learned. They're allowing this contact to continue." Soren exhaled. "We finally see them as they are, alive, conscious, and aware." Over weeks, the crew learned from the Watchers. They were keepers of life across countless star systems, monitoring and protecting ecosystems, species, and civilizations. Their interference was only defensive, aimed at preserving balance in the galaxy. Elara realized that humanity's broadcasts, our signals, rockets, and probes, had been misinterpreted as threats because we acted without awareness. Every mistake, every assumption had triggered reactions we could never have imagined. "All this suffering," Elara said quietly, "was because we spoke before we listened, acted before we understood." Soren nodded. "And yet we survived. That means we can do better." The crew documented everything: the structures, the energy patterns, the behavior of the Watchers. Humanity's knowledge had expanded beyond imagination, but so had its humility. Even as humanity learned, the memories of war haunted them. The lost colonies, the vanished fleets, the friends and loved ones who had died, they were never forgotten. Elara walked through the ship's memorial hall, a quiet space filled with images of the lost. Soren followed, carrying a small artifact from Mars, one of the first colonies attacked. "We can't change what happened," Soren said softly, "but we can ensure it never happens again." Elara nodded. "Our mistakes are written in the stars. We are accountable to the universe now, and we must act with care, with respect, with understanding." The ship moved onward, deeper into the Watcher system, carrying humanity's hope, its lessons, and its promise to act differently. Though the war had ended, its shadow lingered. Some factions on Earth remained suspicious, believing the Watchers were hiding their true intentions. Rumors of secret attacks, covert fleets, and espionage spread. Elara convened a meeting with Soren and other leaders. "The war is over," she said firmly. "We cannot return to fear. Our duty is to peace, to understanding. Anything else is what got us into this mess in the first place." Soren agreed. "We were lucky the Watchers were patient. We cannot assume that will always be the case in the universe." Elara's gaze moved toward the stars outside. "Every species we encounter will judge us by our actions, not our words. We must remember that." The crew, united in purpose, prepared for the next phase of exploration, observing, learning, and interacting with life in the galaxy without fear, without aggression, without assumption. Back on Earth, the consequences of the blind war continued to shape humanity. Governments and military organizations disbanded unnecessary weapons programs, redirecting resources to exploration, education, and diplomacy. Elara returned to Earth briefly to witness the changes. Cities were rebuilding, colonies being restored where possible, and people were finally speaking openly about the war, the losses, and the mistakes that had led to it. We can't erase the past, Elara told a council of leaders. But we can honor it by ensuring it doesn't repeat. The universe is alive, and we are just beginning to understand our place within it. Soren added, the Watchers have taught us patience and humility. Let's not squander that gift. Let it guide our choices, our actions, and our curiosity. The council nodded. The war had been a teacher, harsh and unforgiving, but its lessons were now etched deeply into humanity's consciousness. Meanwhile, in the system where the Watchers dwelled, Elara's crew received a remarkable gift. The Watchers offered technology, knowledge, and guidance, not as weapons, but as tools to help humanity thrive and understand the galaxy responsibly. Dr. Voss marveled at the structures transmitting knowledge through light patterns, mathematics, and music. This is more than science, she said. It's philosophy, ethics, and life itself. They are teaching us how to exist without destroying. Elara felt awe and humility. All this time, we believed we were discovering the universe. In truth, we were learning how to live in it. Soren smiled faintly. And we're finally ready to learn. The crew began studying the gift carefully, knowing that knowledge without wisdom could be dangerous, but also understanding that now, they had guidance that would prevent history from repeating itself. As humans began to integrate the Watchers' lessons, the survivors of the war worked to heal the divisions left behind. Soldiers who had fought blindly were retrained as explorers, diplomats, and teachers. Colonists who had lost everything found purpose in rebuilding and in sharing stories of the war. Elara watched a group of young cadets learning about the war for the first time. Their eyes were wide, but curious, not fearful. We must remember, she said quietly, that the war we fought before we knew they were alive was not a battle of strength, but a test of awareness. We survived because we were given a second chance. Soren added, and we must use that chance wisely. Not just for ourselves, but for every life in the galaxy that might look at us and wonder who we are. Years passed. Humanity became explorers of space rather than conquerors. Ships traveled farther, seeking knowledge, not dominion. Colonies thrived, and the Watchers remained guides, observing without interfering, teaching without commanding. Elara stood on the observation deck of a new station near Saturn, watching the stars shimmer. The universe felt vast but alive, and for the first time, humanity understood its place, not as rulers, but as learners. Soren joined her, holding a small artifact from the first contact with the Watchers. We fought a war before we knew they were alive, he said softly. Now we know better. Elara nodded, her eyes tracing the countless stars. And knowing is everything. We will never forget, and we will never assume again. Above them, the Watchers pulsed gently, a silent, living presence. Humanity had survived the war they did not understand, and now, with humility and awareness, they were ready to step into the galaxy as partners, not invaders. In classrooms across Earth and in space stations orbiting distant planets, children learned the story of the war and the Watchers. They learned not just science and math, but the importance of listening, understanding, and assuming nothing. Elara, older now, spoke at a ceremony honoring those lost in the First War. The war we fought before we knew they were alive taught us that life is precious, and that knowledge without understanding is dangerous. We honor the past by shaping the future with wisdom. Soren, beside her, added, we are part of a living universe, and we must remember that. Every choice we make echoes across the stars. And in that quiet moment, humanity promised itself, and the Watchers, that they would never again fight blindly, never again assume they understood the universe before understanding themselves. Elara sat quietly in her quarters aboard the observation station near Saturn. Years had passed since the war that had nearly destroyed humanity, and the memories remained vivid. She thought of every lost colony, every ship swallowed by the void, and every life extinguished before understanding had been reached. Voss, now retired but still a mentor and advisor, joined her. He held a small hollow projector showing a montage of the war's aftermath, rebuilt colonies, memorials, thriving stations, and young cadets learning about the Watchers. We've come far, Voss said quietly. But do you ever wonder, what if we hadn't survived? Elara shook her head. It's a haunting thought. But we did survive. And that survival carries a responsibility heavier than any weapon we ever held. Soren appeared, carrying a small crystal given to them by the Watchers during their first mission. This is a reminder, he said, that life is precious, fragile, and connected. We fought without knowing, but now we know. That knowledge changes everything. The story of the war became part of human culture. Children learned about the Watchers not as threats, but as guardians. Scientists taught about the consequences of assumptions, and explorers carried the lessons to every corner of the solar system. Elara addressed a class of young cadets one morning. We fought a war before we knew they were alive, she said, her voice steady, filled with quiet authority. And in that war, we learned the cost of ignorance, the weight of assumptions, and the power of understanding. Never forget that. Your choices echo beyond your world, beyond your lifetime. Soren added, we now know we are not alone. Life watches us, learns from us, and sometimes judges us. We must act with humility, wisdom, and courage. The cadets listened intently, understanding the gravity of history and the promise of a wiser future. The Watchers continued to pulse gently through the void, their presence a silent reminder of life beyond comprehension. Humanity no longer feared them but respected them. Communication was careful, thoughtful, and patient. Elara and Soren watched the stars shimmer through the observation window. Do you think they forgive us?
Soren asked.
Elara smiled faintly. Forgiveness isn't theirs to give. But they have taught us what matters: awareness, understanding, and respect. That is enough. Voss joined them, quietly. And it's a lesson humanity will carry forward across generations. Together, they gazed at the vastness, realizing that the war had ended not with victory or defeat, but with insight, growth, and a fragile hope for the future. As decades passed, humanity became explorers and scholars, caretakers of their own world and students of the cosmos. Colonies thrived on Mars, the Moon, and beyond. Ships traveled between stars, always mindful of the lessons from the First War. Elara, now older and respected across the solar system, walked through the Hall of Memorials one final time. Names of those lost were etched in light, a testament to sacrifice and survival. Soren stood beside her. We fought a war we didn't understand, he said softly. And yet we survived. That makes us responsible for everything we do next. Elara nodded, looking at the stars beyond the station. We promised the Watchers and ourselves that we would never again act without understanding. That promise will guide us, always. The stars stretched endlessly ahead, alive with countless possibilities. Humanity had learned humility, patience, and respect. They understood that every action mattered, that knowledge carried responsibility, and that life, everywhere, was precious. Elara, Soren, and Voss stood together, witnessing the soft pulses of the Watchers in the distance. For the first time, humanity felt truly connected to the universe. Elara whispered, we fought a war before we knew they were alive. Now we know. And knowing changes everything. Soren smiled. The future is ours to explore, carefully, wisely together. And with that, humanity took its first steps into a galaxy that had watched, listened, and waited. A war that should never have been fought had ended, not in destruction, but in understanding. And for the first time, the universe felt alive in a way humans could finally appreciate.